Thank you. Sure. Everyone's invited. They're on Chesam and Allah. A bunch of lines down. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 lines down. Last word on the line, Chesam and Allah. So we're trying Ches, 8. We're trying Ches. So we're trying to figure out why is it that I need allow to teach me with respect to the Achos Isha, the case where the brother was married to the sister of the deceased brother was married to the sister of the live brother's wife. So then the word allow says Isha lachosalo sikach the tzor the galose vasa allow b'chayeha. The word allow teaches me I don't do yibum in such a case. So why would I have thought that you do yibum in such a case? We said, why should the yibum override Mr. Arias other than the case of Eshesach? So we gave answers, and now the Gemara says, another possible answer. We said maybe it's I go to Hekesh, but the Hekesh was very limited as to what it would apply to. We'd say even to history, it would be a very limited case, we just said. So another possibility is Asya Hekesh with Rabbi Yonah. Maybe the Hekesh could be from Rabbi Yonah to Amar Rabbi Yonah. Rabbi Yonah said, the Torah had said a pasuk that combined all of the arayas together explicitly. Anybody who violates any of these arayas that were described in the parsha, everybody, so all of them would get curry. So all of them are combined together. So all of them would be compared to the case of Eshesach. I would have thought that just like Eshesach, my Eshesach Sharia, I would override that Isser Arayas in the case of Yibum. So Arayas Nami Sharians. I would think I'd override all of the Isser Arayas in the case of Yibum. So Kasav Achmana allow. So that's why I needed the word allow to teach me that the Isser of Achos Isha applies even in the case of allow. Allow, as we said in the Gemara and Gimel Amid Beis, it's a Zera Shava, because it says Yibama Yabo allow. So it teaches me in this case where you have Yibum, you're not allowed to do allow. Losika, you're not allowed to do allow. You're not allowed to do Yibum in the case of Achos Isha. So Amalei Rabbacha Midifti the Ravina. Okay, so that teaches me in the case of Achos Isha that Yibum would not override Achos Isha. I have all the other cases of Arias. Why do I have to assume that the same would be true in all the other cases of Arias? Maybe all the other cases of Arias should be compared to the case of Eshesach. All the Arayas are compared to each other. So I can compare them all to the case of Eshesach, where Yibum does override the Yisr of Eshesach. The fact that the Yavam is marrying his brother's wife, which otherwise would be an Yisr Arayas. And you can compare it as well to the case of Achos Isha, where the Torah says that, you don't perform Yibum in such a case, because the word allow. So my chazis the akshis lachos ishak shin leishesach. So when it comes to all the other arayas, why do you assume that you should compare them to achos isha and then say that it's not permitted to do yibum in the case of any of the other arayas, like a person's daughter? Why don't we compare all the other cases to ishesach when yibum is permitted? So the Gemara gives a couple of answers. One possible answer is that whenever you have an option of comparing something for leniency purposes or for stringency purposes, so we always go in the direction of stringency. We're Jewish. The kula v'chumma, the chumma makshin, and you have an opportunity to accept the chumma, so we always prefer chumma over kulas. Ibai is the chumma of the week. Ibai seima, or alternatively, all the other arayas are more similar to achos isha because hacha trei yisuri. All the other arayas, if it's a case of yibum, you have built in the problem of eshesach because you're dealing with the dead brother's wife. And you have plus one other of the other arayas. So haka trei yisuris. The case of achos isha also had trei yisuri. It was eshesach and achos isha. The trei mitrei yapinan. So we derive all the other arayas because it's a case of two yisuri arayas that we're deriving from a case of two yisuri arayas, namely achos isha. But the case of eshesach, where the woman is not otherwise an isur arayas, there's only one Isser. It's the Isser of Eshesach. Otherwise, the woman would be permitted. So all the other cases of Arayas are Eshesach plus. The Trei Michadad Lo Yapinan. So we don't derive Eshesach plus, where there are two Isser Arayas in a case of one Isser Arayas. Only in that case of Eshesach would we say that even would be permitted, not the other cases. So Rava says the following word. Rava Amar Erba Gufa Lo Sricha Kwa. Says a big chiddush. He says that I don't need a pasuk to teach me, like in the case of Achos Isha. It says Aleha. I don't need Aleha. I don't need a pasuk to teach me that if it's a case other than Eishes off, the Yibum would not override the Yisra. Of course, Yibum wouldn't override the Yisra. What are you kidding me? Of course, the positive commandment of Yibum is not going to override Lo Sase of Kares. So the one case, the Torah says Eishes off. That is the mitzvah of Yibum. That's an exception to the rule. All the other cases, of course, they wouldn't over. I wouldn't have thought that it would be permissible to marry your wife's sister in the case of Yibum. Of course not. When I have the pasuk teaches me Allah that you're not allowed to marry. That means you can't marry the co-wife. I would have thought that maybe you can marry the co-wife of the wife's sister in the case of Yibum. So it teaches me no, you're not when you're not allowed to marry the one woman because she's an Isser Ever, so you can't marry the co-wife either. The Ever lo sricha kra. Is that true though? That the Erva, to teach me that the Erva herself is prohibited in the case of Achos Isha, that didn't require a pasuk. Tanya, but didn't say it said in the Brisa in the Brisa it said Emi Elahi, that I derived from the word Aleh that she's going to be prohibited. How do I know that the tzara is also prohibited? So we say no. That was just Agav Rora. That was incidental that the Brisa said, oh, I would have only known that the Erva, the Achos Isha is prohibited. How do I know that tzara is prohibited? That was just a lead-in. But what we're really deriving is just Mishum Sarasa, that the co-wife is prohibited. But then the continuation of the Brisa that analogizes all the other Isuri Arayos to Achos Isha says, Eli Elahein, that I know that all the other Isuri Arayos will be prohibited based on the analogy. But how do I know that Saros are also prohibited? So we say also based on the analogy. So the Gemara says that was also just a way of leading up to the real conclusion. Mishum Sarosayim. That we didn't really need a special limud to teach me that the arayos themselves would be prohibited in the case of Yibum. Of course, that's obvious. It's just that the analogy to Achos Isha is to teach me that the co-wives are always going to be prohibited as well. Tashma, we have a kasha on what Rava said from a statement of Rebbe. What did Rebbe say? Rebbe says that there's a pasuk. The pasuk says with respect to Yibum, it says Yivama Yavo Aleh, that the Yavam is going to perform the mitzvah of Yibum by having relations with his dead brother's wife, Lakacha, will marry her, Lo li Isha, V'yibma, and perform Yibum. It says Ulakacha, and it says V'yibma. So the fact that you have that extra hey with both words, Ulakacha and V'yibma, it doesn't say V'lakach and doesn't say V'yavam, it says V'lakacha, V'yibma. So Lakacha, Lakacha, V'yavam, V'yibma, the fact that I have the extra hey, so that comes Lasot Saras Varayos. That comes to teach me. We're going to see exactly how. The Gemara is going to speak about this later on. It's going to teach me that this teaches me that in a case where it would be an erva, the brother's wife is otherwise an erva. So then one doesn't perform the mitzvah of Yibum, and one doesn't perform the mitzvah of Yibum with the co-wife either. So it seems that the Rebbe is learning from both the extra words, L'kacha and V'yibma. Somehow, the fact that there are the two separate words, Rebbe is learning. One is to teach me that the case of erva is going to be prohibited, and when you have a situation of Yibum, and the other is to teach me that the co-wife is prohibited. So we see that according to Rebbe, I need a special, according to him, I do need a special limud to teach me that an erva is normally going to be prohibited. So that seems to go against Rabbah, who says, I don't need a special limud to teach me that an erva other than Eishes Ach is going to be prohibited. Yes, Eddie?
Yeah. We're trying to... How could the Torah have written the word V'lakach if it was referring to her?
It's because it's referring to him. It's referring to the brother. But lakach, he's going to take her. Even the word lakacha is going on him. He shall take her. The word lakacha with a mapike means he, the brother-in-law, shall take the sister-in-law as a wife. So since it's going on him anyway, I don't need the word lakacha. Obviously, we're talking about her. He says so. It could say v'lakach. It could say he's taking her. V'lakach lo liisha. It could just say v'lakach lo liisha. That this one that the husband died, right? That's what the pasuk says. She can't marry somebody else. And it goes, and the Yavama should marry her, and he should take her for a wife. Why does it say an extra hey in the word v'lakach? It could just say v'lakach lo lisha. It doesn't have to say v'lakacha. Why does it have the extra hey? So Rebbe learns from the extra hey. So one of the extra hays teaches me that if she's an erva, then this doesn't apply. It's only lakacha, only this one you would perform yibum on, not a different one. And the other extra hay teaches me that you wouldn't marry you can't marry the co-wife of the erva either. So we see I do need a special limit. So the Gemara answers, no, Rebbe really is only learning one thing. He's only learning the one thing, that these extra words that teach me that you're not allowed to marry a co-wife of a woman who was married to the brother, who otherwise is an Isser Erba. But the woman herself, I don't need a pasuk for that. That's obvious. V'atrei cry kanasivle. Well, wait a second, but he had two different psukim. He had a Lakacha and he had V'yibma. So obviously he's learning one of them with respect to one pasuk and the other one with respect to the other pasuk. So my love kadle ever v'chad tzara. Is it not that one pasuk is teaching me that he is not allowed to marry the woman who is otherwise an erba to him, like his wife's sister, and the other is to teach me the co-wife. But I do need a separate pasuk for the erba. So we say no, lo idi b'di l'tzara. Both of them refer to the tzara. One is to prohibit and one is to permit. One of the psukim, and the Gemara is going to elaborate on exactly how we derive this according to Rebbe. One of the psukim teaches me that that he's not allowed to marry a co-wife in a case of yibum, and he's not allowed to marry the erva herself. Right? If one of the wives is his wife's sister and he can't marry her, so then if it's a case of yibum, just like he can't marry her, he can't marry the tzara. The Mishri. And the other pasuk teaches me that he is permitted to marry the co-wife of an erba if it's not b'makom mitzvah. Like let's say that his daughter was not married to his brother. His daughter was married to the next door neighbor. The next door neighbor is not related to him at all. Then the next door neighbor is married to his daughter and also to another woman. And then the next door neighbor dies. So then it's true he can't marry his daughter, but he can marry the co-wife, even though this other woman was the co-wife of his daughter. But since it's not a situation of yibum, in such a case, he could marry the tzara. That's the example that Rashi gives. I don't understand why Rashi didn't give a more obvious example. The obvious example would be that the brother is married to his wife's sister, and the brother has children. And the brother has children. So there's no mitzvah of yibum. Then the brother dies. As Rashi could have said, so in such a case, it would be permissible to marry the marry the brother's other wife, who's not the wife's sister. Why didn't Rashi give that example? Mistama, that's the din. I don't know why he didn't give that example. I looked in the Rambam, I looked in the portion, couldn't figure out why didn't he give that example. So my time up. So what's the reason? That the yavam v'yimma. So Rebbe derives that from the extra word v'yimma. The makam yibam hu de asira tzara shlo b'makam yibam shariat tzara. The tzara is only prohibited. The co-wife is only prohibited when the other wife is an erba. If it's a case of yibum, if it's not a case of yibum, so then the co-wife, like for example, the daughter is married to the next door neighbor, is also married to another wife. The next door neighbor dies, so then one would be able to be allowed to marry the other wife. So Amar Abashi Mastisa Nami Deka. Our Mishnah also seems to support Rabba's idea. Getting back to Rabba. Rabba said, Erva lo tzricha kos. Our Mishnah seems to be emphasizing that the chiddush of the Mishnah is that not only is an erva prohibited in a case where otherwise there would be a situation of yibum, but the brother's wife was also an erva in another way, by being, let's say, for example, the wife's sister or the daughter of the live brother. So Rabba said, I don't need to teach me that the wife's sister or the daughter is going to be prohibited in a yibum situation. That's obvious. I need to teach me simply that the co-wife is also prohibited. So the Mishnah seems to indicate that. What did the Mishnah say? That there were 15 women who were ervos, that they exempt their co-wives, that the co-wives are exempt from yibum or chalitza. The emphasis is on the co-wives. It doesn't say that the erva herself is petura. That's obvious, and she also exempts the co-wives. It just focuses on the fact that the erva exempts the co-wives from yibum or chalitza. So shma mina. So we see from here that's a proof that seems to be a support for Rabba. That I don't need a special limud to teach me that the erba herself is going to be off limits in a yibum situation. She has any other isur erba other than a ishazach. Why is it that the erba herself doesn't require a pasuk to teach me that she's going to be prohibited? Because, as we said, but that's it. Because it's clear the positive commandment of Yibum is not enough. It's not strong enough to override the prohibition of a negative prohibition that carries with it curse. So, but the same thing is true of the Tzara. The Tzara also, what is she? She's an Eishes Ach. In the case of Yibum, she's an Eishes Ach. I have the word that says Litzror. Litzror teaches me that she's bundled together with the Erva, who's her co-wife. Just like the co-wife remains Asura in a Yibum situation, if she's an Achos Isha, so too, the Tzara is going to remain in the Yisr of Eishes Ach. Eishes Ach is also a Losas Sheyesh Bakaris. So Tzara Nami Lo Sibai Krav. Mishum the Ein Esi Docha Losas Sheyesh Bakaris. The Tzara also should require pasuk. So Amalei Ravacha Bar Bebai the Ravina. The word Mar seems to be extraneous. So Ravacha Bar Bebai said to Ravina, yeah, Hachi Kama Mishmei the Rava. In fact, we have to revise Rava. That's what Rava meant. Rava meant that you don't need a pasuk to teach me that the erva is off limits, and I don't need a special pasuk. Once I know the tzror, that a co-wife is always combined together with the erva herself, I don't need a pasuk to teach me that tzara is off limits. Tzara namilo is strict krav. It's strict krav. What do I need the pasuk for? Why does it say aleha? The pasuk is teaching me the mishri tzara shlomo makom mitzvah. That's the whole point. The whole point of the pasuk is simply to be permissible. Is to be permissive, to say that when is it that a tzara is going to be prohibited, when the top of Chesam is based, that's only if it's a situation of Yibum, but it's not a situation of Yibum, like the daughter, one's daughter is married to the next door neighbor, and there's another wife, and the next door neighbor dies, so one can marry the co-wife. So my timer, how do I derive it from the word Aleha? So Amakra Aleha, it says the Isha Elachosa Lo Sikach, the Swor, the Galos Ebasa Aleha Bechayeha. So B'Makam Aleha, Hu De'asila, only if there is an aleha, a situation of yibum. How do I know aleha stands for yibum? Because yibama yavo aleha. That's what we learned in the pasuk of Gimel Amud Beis. Only in a situation of yibum is the tzara going to be prohibited. Shlomo makom aleha sharia. The word aleha is coming to teach me that don't worry, if it wouldn't be a situation of yibum, if we shlomo makom mitzvah, so then the co-wife of the Ever would be permitted. So Amalei Rami Bachama LaRava. So Rami Bachama asked the question, and Rava said, wait, is that really true? Maybe the erva herself is only prohibited in a case of yibum, but otherwise you would be allowed to marry an erva. Maybe the pasuk is teaching me, when is it that you can't marry your wife's sister? You can't marry your wife's sister. She falls in front of you for yibum. But if it would be any other situation, you can marry your wife's sister. It would be permissible. What do you mean? How could you say such a thing? Isn't it a kal v'chomer? B'makom mitzvah, sira, even when it's a mitzvah, performing yibum, the Torah says you're not allowed to marry an erva. So shlomo makom mitzvah sharia. So in a case where it's a shlomo makom mitzvah, it's going to be permissible. So Rami Bachama said, "Come on, we're learning Yevamos here. It doesn't have to be logical. We have to, figure out that what exactly the different limudim are teaching us, even if it seems strange." So Amalei tzara tochia. The case of the co-wife should teach us it's the opposite. She's only prohibited if it would be a yibum situation, but if it wouldn't be a yibum situation, the co-wife of Neva would be permitted. So mitzvah asir, shlomo makom mitzvah sharia. So Amalei, so he responded. Rabbi responded to Rami Bachama, and he said, Alecha amakra b'chayeh kol sheb'chayeh. You can't say that it's a separate. I learned from the word b'chayeh. It says, Isha lachosa lo sikach l'sor the galos ebasa aleha b'chayeh. That you're never allowed to marry your wife's sister as long as the wife is still alive, right? As long as the wife is still alive, it doesn't matter if it's a yibum situation or it's not a yibum situation, it's going to be prohibited. So he said, so Rami Bachama said, nah, that I could say b'chayeh is coming to teach me something else entirely. Just to teach me that the wife's sister is going to become permissible after death, that even in a yibum situation after death, that she would be permissible. So Rava retorts, no. After death, I could learn from Hay Meisha V'Visha Elachosa. The beginning of the pasuk says Visha Elachosa Lo Sikach. It means that the first wife is still alive. So I don't need Bechayah to teach me that. So Rami Bachama said, no. If I would have only had Isha Lachosa, I would have thought when the woman's alive and she's Isha and she's your wife. But if you would divorce her, then you could marry this sister. So that's why you need a chayet. That even though one divorced his wife, he still can't marry the sister as long as the wife is still alive. But I don't necessarily derive from b'chayah kol sheb'chayah. So how do I know that I wouldn't say that the erba is only going to be prohibited. The achos isha is only going to become prohibited in the case of yibum, because after all, the pasuk says aleh, like Rami Bacham is kasha, and if it's bishloba makom mitzvah, just like the tzara is permitted shloba makom mitzvah, maybe the erba, the achos isha would normally be permitted as well, as long as it's not a yibum situation. So Rav Huna bar Tzachalifa mishmei the Rava. So Rav Huna bar Tzachalifa says in the name of Rava, we're still trying to defend Rava here. He says, Trey Kraik Sivi. Now, if you look at the pasuk, the very same pasuk that we're darshaning, there are two different phrases. Trey Kraik here means there are two different phrases in the pasuk. Trey Kraik Sivi. It says, Sivi Shalachosa Lo Sikach Litzror. You're not allowed to marry your wife's sister and to bundle together. Uksiv Legalos Erbasa. And it says as well, the Galos Erbasa Alev B'chayah, that it's a prohibition of Giloy Arayos. The first part of the pasuk said Litzror, that it bundled together the co-wife, and the second part of the pasuk that said the Galos Erbasa is only talking about the Erva herself, the Chadamashma. Sounds like it's only her. HaKetzad. So in one situation, both the wife and the co-wife are going to be prohibited, and in the other situation, both the Erva and the co-wife are going to be prohibited, and in the other situation, only the Erva is going to be prohibited. So HaKetzad, B'makom mitzvah. So you have to break it down like this. That if it would be Mamakom Mitzvah, Shtei and Asura. So then both of them are going to be prohibited if it's Mamakom Mitzvah. That's the first part of the pasuk. Shlo Mamakom Mitzvah, where it says so that only the Ever is prohibited. He Asura Tzarasa Muteris. So then you do have the situation where the Ever herself is prohibited. You can't say she's permitted because it says Legalos Erbasa. She's prohibited in that situation, and the Tzara will be permissible in that situation. Wait a second, why do we have to say that it's the Ever that's going to be more chomer? Maybe the tzara will be more chomer. Why can't I switch it around? What do you mean? How would I switch it around? Why don't I say like this? B'makom mitzvah hi asur tzarasa muteris. If it's a case of erba, maybe that's the case where it's legalos erbasa, where the erba herself is going to be prohibited. If it's a case of yibum, maybe that's the case where the erba herself will be prohibited and the tzara will be permitted. And if it would not be a case of yibum, so why don't I say in that case stay an asur? So I could say that in that case they're both going to be asur. How do I know that in the case of yibum, if that's the case where the pasuk is telling me that the tzara is going to be asur? Maybe the case of yibum the tzara is muteris, and only the case when it's not yibum the tzara is also asur. That's where I would say litzur. So imkain lo yomar aleh. Then I don't need the word aleh at all, because why wouldn't I need the word aleh? Because I have two phrases in the pasuk. One phrase that says litzror. There's one situation where both of them are going to be prohibited, and then I have another phrase in the pasuk that says legalos erbasa, that only one is going to be permitted. So obviously, I'm going to say that if I didn't have the word aleh and I'm just relying upon logic alone, so then I'm going to say that the heter, when is it that I permit the tzara? That's going to be in a mitzvah situation. And when is it that I wouldn't permit the tzara? That's when it's not a mitzvah situation. So therefore, aleh is coming to teach me that it's different. It's telling me no. It's telling me that when is it that the tzara is prohibited? The tzara is going to be prohibited in a mitzvah situation. So Amalei Rav Ashi, the Rav Kahana, mimai dahai oleh li'isura. How do I know? So Rav Ashi asked the question, how do I know that the word aleh is coming to teach me that there's an issur? We've been deriving all this time, since Gimel Amud Beis, that the word aleh is teaching me that in the case of achos isha, even in a yibum situation where it says yavama yavo aleh, the prohibition against marrying one's wife's sister would apply even in a yibum situation. Dilma lehetera. Maybe the word aleh is coming to teach me a heter. What's the heter? The heter is that it's saying lo sikach l'sur. You're not allowed to normally marry your wife's sister, and presumably if your wife's sister has a co-wife, you couldn't marry her either. But if it's a situation of aleh, then I would apply the pasuk of yivama yavo aleh. So then it would be permissible. And this is what the Torah is telling me. Isha lachosa lo sikach l'sur. That I start off the pasuk and saying if it wouldn't be a yibum situation, then you can never marry your wife's sister, and you also can't marry the co-wife of your wife's sister. Lohi, if she would get divorced, for example, lohi below tzarasa, shalom makom aleh. But if it would, because that's a shalom makom aleh, because that's not in a situation of yibum. But if it would be a situation of yibum where it says yivama yavo aleh, And that's why I have a le at the end of the pasuk, legalos evasa aleh b'chayav. So then maybe shtein mutaris. So then maybe the wife's sister would become permissible, and the co-wife would also be permissible. So Im came. So he said that doesn't make any sense. Legalos eva. Because one of the phrases in the pasuk we mentioned was it says legalos evasa aleh b'chaya, and evasa doesn't have the word litzur. That indicates there's some sort of a scenario where only the Eva herself is going to be prohibited, but not the co-wife. The chada hechi mishkachas. According to that limud that Rav Ashi is suggesting to Rav Kahana, you wouldn't have a situation where one of them was permitted and one of them would be prohibited. Even Malcolm Mitzvah, according to the way that he's suggesting that we darshan aleh lehatera, it would follow that if it would be a mitzvah situation, both of them would be permitted. Shtei and mutaris. Yishlava Malcolm Mitzvah, and if it wouldn't be a mitzvah situation, the beginning of the pasuk litzur, shtei and asuras, they would both be prohibited. So you can't learn that way.
The Havamina is that the brother could take actually both of the wives.
Sure, right? Okay. If it would be b'malka mitzvah, or at least either one, not both together, but at least either one. Okay. But it would be he would take either one, right? He would take either one. So gufa, because we say bayis echad, that it says ashelo yivnes bayis akiv. It's by bayis echad, bone of lo shnei batim. You can only marry one of the women. So gufa Rebbe, that's a separate limud. You have to put all the limudim together. Yavamas is like geometry. You have to know all the axioms and the postulates and the corollaries. You got to keep track of them. So gufa Rebbe Omer. So Rebbe says, so we're going to go back and we're going to try to understand what Rebbe was saying beforehand a little bit better. So Rebbe said that he doesn't derive from anything from aleh. We'll figure out something else to do with the word aleh. The halacha that you can't marry an erba, even in a yibum situation, he derives from the pasuk that says from the fact that it says but and not be abam be ma. From the extra haze, that's how he derives everything. That's to teach me that everybody that's in an erba situation, the erba is prohibited and the tzara is prohibited. So midi tzaras ksiva hacha. It doesn't say anything about tzaras. In that phrase of the pasuk, in the parsha of Yibum, it doesn't talk about it. Tzara. It says, you have a Yibum situation, a brother died and he left a wife and no children. So then the living brother is supposed to marry that woman and do Yibum with that woman. Where did it say anything about a co-wife? How can Rebbe derive from that pasuk that the co-wife is of the Eber is going to be prohibited? Where does it say anything? Also, tzaros we derive from a totally different pasuk with respect to achos isha. From the word litzor, isha lachosa lo sikach litzor. So why doesn't Rebbe derive it from litzor as well? So the answer is Rebbe says no. I use litzor to teach me a totally different case. Litzor mapikle Rebbe to Rabbi Shimon. He derives from tzor the case of Rabbi Shimon. What's the case of Rabbi Shimon? No, sis, there's not a case where you have an erva and a co-wife. Litzor is like this: that if you have 3 brothers and 2 of the brothers are married to 2 sisters, you can have that. You can have 2 brothers married to 2 different sisters. That's perfectly permissible. Question of Tzava, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, we do it or not. I knew people. I knew somebody. I knew a family in Brooklyn. 2 of the brothers were married to 2 sisters. So, they did it. And then what happens in this case? Both brothers pass away. Both brothers pass away. And now the 2 wives are both in front of the 3rd brother, who's not married to any of the sisters. To do Yibum. But the problem is that now there's 2 sisters. Each one is a sister of the other one that fell in front of him. So neither one is married to him. It's not a Achos Isha, but it's a little bit like they're married to him. It's called Achos Tukaso. That because there's a Zika, there's some sort of a linkage that the Torah creates when a brother dies without children and leaves a wife. The wife is linked to the live brother, the living brother. So therefore, they're both considered to be linked to him. And it's like a partial quasi-marriage. So each one is like the sister of his quasi-wife. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon says that Litzror teaches me that since these 2 sisters are bundled together, that there would be no need to do Yibum or Chalitza. The other Tanaim say, no, you would do Chalitza. You wouldn't do Yibum because it's Achos Tukaso. But it's not like an actual sister of a wife. It's not an actual heir, so therefore you'd have to do Chalitza. And Rabbi Shimon says, no. You don't have to do Yibum or Chalitza because it says Litzror. At the time that they became Tzara Zulazu, they were put in both the same category. that they were both they're both linked together to marry the third brother. So in such a case that they're bundled together, so then there's no mitzvah of yibum or chalitza altogether. It's like a wife sister. So that's what he would derive with Tzur to teach me. Okay. So therefore, it doesn't refer, in his opinion, he doesn't refer to a co-wife situation. So a co-wife situation, it only refers to two sisters. So co-wife situation, he has to derive from lukacha and biyibah. So again, the first question that we had, though, that we asked from Rebbe is, where does it say in the pasuk lukacha and biyibah? Where does it say anything about a tzara over there? That he uses this pasuk to teach me that when there's an erva, in a situation of yibum, so not only is the erva exempt from yibum and chalitza, but the co-wife is too. He doesn't learn from Aleh. He learns from that pasuk. So how does he derive co-wife from there? So haki kamar. So imkain leimakra, really, if ulakacha was only going to deal with the erva herself, and not the or is only dealing with the yavama herself, saying that it's only talking about marrying the brother's wife and it's nothing to do with co-wives. It could have said ulakach. My ulakacha. Why does it add the word ulakacha? So ulakacha teaches me like this: that whenever there are two likuchen, there are two women who he could possibly perform yibum with. It means that there is one woman that his brother was married to, and there was another woman, and he can marry either one. Sharia. So it's only when he has an option, ulakacha, that he can pick one out of the two. And he could say, neither one of them is related to me, other than being my brother's wives. And he can marry one, or he can marry the other one. So then that would be permissible for him to marry the co-wife in such situation where he can marry the first wife. Below, but in a situation where it's not lukacha, where he has his pick of the draw, where he absolutely can't marry one of them because one of them is an erva, it's his wife's sister, for example. So if it's not his pick of the draw, it's not a lukacha, or I could pick this one, or I could pick that one. So then Travayu Asirin. So then both of them are going to be prohibited. And then the word v'yima is teaching me this is only the makom yibum. The makom yibum who the asir tzara, like we mentioned earlier. The Rebbe derives from v'yima that it's only in a case of yibum that the tzara is going to be prohibited. Shalom makom yibum sharia tzara. But if it's not a case of yibum, so then a co-wife of an erva, like the next door neighbor and the daughter case that we mentioned earlier, would be permitted. So Rebbe did a wonderful job explicating the word lekacha, teaching me what I learned from the fact it doesn't say v'lakach and it says lekacha. But the chachamim who don't derive from lekacha that a tzara is prohibited, they derive that from the word aleh. So what do they do with the word lekacha? So look at Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. They use it to teach me the halakha of Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina. What did Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina teach me? The Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina is another important rule. We keep on accumulating important rules. You have to keep track of all of them in Yevamos. So Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina l'kacha malame. The word l'kacha teaches you that once a man performs yibum on his brother's wife, she becomes like a regular wife. A regular wife. The whole Eishes Hach business is out the window. She's a regular wife. He wants to get rid of her. At that point, there's no longer chalitza. Because once he married her, she's a regular wife. He could just banish her with a get. Malami shemengarsha beget. But not only that, he could remarry her. So with the Isser of Eishes Hach is off the table. He could remarry her. Are you allowed to remarry a wife that you divorced? Yeah. Maxi Gushasa was only prohibited if the woman married somebody else in the interim. She didn't marry somebody else in the interim, then it's permissible as long as the man's not a Kohen. He could take back a wife that he divorced. I remember a case of when I used to visit my great aunt in Bnei Brak. There was a rabbi who divorced his wife, then he married another woman, and who was a Gioris, I remember. And then after a few years, it didn't work out. He divorced her, and he went back to his original wife. So I was thinking, isn't it Maxi Gushasa? He says, no, it was okay. Just the fact that he remarried didn't make his first wife prohibited. It would only be if she had remarried. She had not remarried in the interim, so he remarried her. After it didn't work out with the next wife, he went back to his first wife. Okay. Shemigasha, and he wasn't a Kohen. Shemigasha again, Maksiva. V'yibma. And what do the other rabbis do with the word v'yibma? What do they do with the word v'yibma? Al kocha. V'yibma teaches me that yibum works even al kocha. It's not nice. It's not a nice thing to do. You're not allowed. Not supposed to rape somebody. But in the event that the man would perform yibum against the will of the sister-in-law, it would still count. It would be considered to be married. Normally, you marry a woman against the will. It doesn't count. But in this case, it would count. That's what I learned from v'yibma. The Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, how does Rabbi derive Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi uses a lokacha v'yibma to teach me the whole Tzara story. So how does he learn this rule of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina that once one's married to the Eish Sak, they can they can banish her with a get alone, and then she can even remarry her despite the fact that she's an Eish Sak. She just becomes like a regular wife. Mili Isha Nafka. So he derives that from the fact that it says L'kaka lo the Isha, that he takes her to be his lawfully wedded wife. So he just takes it. He learns it from the word Melisha. And al korcha miyibama yabo alenafka. He doesn't need yima to teach me that yibum works al korcha. That he derives from the fact that it says earlier in the pasuk yibama yabo aleh. Before it says l'kacha lo lisha v'yima, it said yibama yabo aleh. That the yavam will have relations with her. So it sounds like have relations with her whether she's willing or not. It would still work in order to effectuate yibum. The Rebbe hayaleh mayabileh. What does Rebbe then do with this word aleh? We just spent 5 blot trying to understand like the meaning and the application of the word aleh in the context of prohibiting sorrows. And Rebbe said, I don't need aleh for that. I learned the whole thing, the whole story about sorrows. So what does Rebbe do with the aleh at the end of the pasuk regarding the prohibition of marrying one's wife's sister? The galos aleh b'chayev. What does he do with that? He doesn't need for it to teach me anything about yibum. So what does he do with that? So he uses a lab to teach me, just like the case of Achos Isha, is dealing with an Issa Kare. So when I have the word alab in a different context, when it deals with when you bring a korban chatas, it's only when there was a situation where if the person would have committed the chet in question willfully, he would have been chayav kares. That's the only situation where if somebody commits the chet b'shkaga, that they would bring a korban chatas. The Chatatanya, and that I learned from the word alab. That the Bezdin, if they made a harab that was betos, they told people it's mutter to do something, and it turned out that it was usher, and most of the congregation relied upon them. They have to bring a parhalim davash of sibur. That's only if it was a type of avera where if it would be done willfully, the punishment would be kares. So Mashiach. And so too the Mashiach, the Kohen Gadol, when he commits a sin, he has to bring his special korban. We read about all of that last week in Parshas Vayikra. And so too, if the whole tzibur made a mistake in worshiping idols because of a mistaken hurrah from the Bezdin, so she goes so chatas. It's not nami of a mishnah that supports that. When is it that a person, an individual person, brings a korban chatas? It's only if it would be an avera that if it's done willfully would have carried with it a chiv kares. Only then a yachin maybe kispo seira that the yachin brings either korban, either a lamb or a female lamb or a female goat. Nasi maybe seir, and if it would be the nasi, it would be the melech, so he has to bring a seir, a goat. Mashiach who bezdin, and if it's the Kohen Gadol or it's the bezdin that made a mistake in a rod, then maybe in a par, then they bring a par with avodas kochavim, and if there's the avera with respect to a person commits idolatry, b'shogeg, so a yachid and a nasi u'mashiach. If it's the yachid or the melech or the Kohen Gadol, maybe in seira they bring a female goat. And if it's the tzibur, it was the bezdin that made a mistake in hara that the majority of the tzibur relied upon. So in such a case, they would bring tzibur maybe in par v'seir. Then there's a par and a seir, a par le'ola and a seir l'chatas. Minani mili. How do we know that there always has to be a chiyuv kares? It's Tana Rabbanan, because it says v'nodah hachatas. But it says that they found out about the chatas, the sin that was performed. Asher chatu aleh. That it says with respect to the when the kahal there was a mistake that was made in terms of a mistake in hara. It says asher chatu aleh. So that means a chiyuv kares. Rebbe says, Rebbe Omer, he learns that from the word aleh. Nema kan aleh. It says v'nodah chatas asher chatu aleha. And where else does it say aleh with respect to achos isha? V'nemar la'alan aleh. Just like the Yisur achos isha malan davar shekayiv and ashadona kares ashigdaso chatas. Is something for which, if it was done willfully, it'd be a chiyuv kares, and if somebody does it b'shogi, they bring a chatas. Afkan. So too, when it speaks about v'nodah chatas asher chatu aleh, when the entire congregation sinned, afkan davar shekayiv and ashadona kares ashigdaso chatas. It has to be a type of sin that, if it's done willfully, would carry with it a chiyuv kares. That's what Rebbe learns from the word leha. Stop it. Okay.